the ATF had this operation where they were looking at straw purchasers of firearms, basically people buying up a specific type of firearms that were on a shopping list that the cartels wanted to buy, including 50 cals, FN 57 pistols, which are small pistols with a high velocity round that will go through a bulletproof vest, AR-15s of all kinds that could quickly be modified into full auto down in Mexico with a drilling a few holes and making a few things to them. So these people were buying all these. The ATF was watching them and allowing them to walk those firearms into Mexico under the guise of trying to track them somehow, which doesn't make a lot of sense for most people that kind of look at that operation. The only reason people found out about it was because of the murder of a few federal agents, of the U.S. federal agents that were killed with those guns. One of my friends was shot with one of those pistols outside of his house, and they shot him and they shot his wife. Both of them were killed. Daughter was in the back seat, lost part of her arm. When that happened, the guns were unique. They were like, we didn't never like the mata policías is what they call them. They're the cop killers. I hadn't seen those before, so they were unique and interesting. And later on in life, I was watching CNN and seeing the hearings going on. I was like, oh, that's where they came from. 2 federal agents changed a lot, and it was politicized. There was a whole scandal up here. But in Mexico, how many people died with those firearms, being let go down there? And also, what type of sentiment do you think the local populace has of the United States after all those guns were basically handed over to some of these groups? Gun trafficking is another giant part of the equation and part of the problem down there, as far as the amount of munitions, weapons, and now we were also getting tradecraft material from conflict zones outside of Mexico. So weaponized drones. The first time we saw some of those weaponized drones was in Syria, and like a few weeks later, grenades were being dropped on the roofs of some public officials' building.
The cartels are using drones?
Yeah, that's been going on for a while. There's a place in Michoacan that has some pretty interesting videos, and the interesting part of it is because the federal police down there are actually working hand in hand with a United Carteles Unidos group, which is basically the local cartels, to try and fight off the new generation cartel moving into Michoacan. So even the federal forces are fighting with the cartels to try and keep this larger cartel out. And there's videos of these civilian drones basically dropping explosives. They found some explosive testing ranges out there that are basically replicating stuff that you would see the IRA use during the troubles out there, from homemade mortars. IEDs have been used in Mexico. Not that much, but they're making like a presence again. We don't have a lot of ordnance around like Iraq, but we do have a big mining industry down there. So mining explosives of all kinds are pretty easy to get. So you start seeing that. And also, there's some exotic weaponry coming in from the south now and from the ocean. That some of it is probably U.S. Military equipment sold to various South American governments that are now not as stable as they were, and they're kind of making their way into black markets. So a lot of those 50 cal and vehicle-mounted technical type machine guns, and some of the RPGs and man pads or remote control guided missiles that have been found in cartel hands are probably making their way up from down south.
Do you get these like multi-million-dollar systems like the HIMARS system in the Ukraine? You get like super sophisticated advanced technology, or not? So like this is like military grade. I'm not sure what the application would be exactly in the Mexican
some of the sophisticated stuff I've seen are man pads, which is basically remote guided missiles. Yeah. I've seen some of those found down there.
What is the application exactly? A display of power?
There are no-fly zones over parts of Mexico.
For this reason?
The New Generation Cartel took down a helicopter. There's been incidents of military helicopters falling from the sky, and they said that it was mechanical issues. But again, I'm not going to do conspiracy theories out there. But there's a lot of videos on TikTok of Sinaloa cartel forces at parties, carrying around rocket launchers on their backs, and so
So there's an increased probability of mechanical failures over those areas when you're flying a helicopter.
Yeah, there's no fly zones over some parts of Mexico.
Okay.
Oh, man. Another thing you're seeing now is night vision equipment that is clearly military grade from the U.S. that was probably abandoned in some war field out there, maybe Afghanistan or somewhere like that, and it's being found in safe houses and in the hands of cartel forces. You want to talk about a scary opponent? Somebody wearing night vision with a suppressed firearm. Those types of capabilities are now out there. Also, there's this tendency to think, and every now and then you'll see these cartel videos with these guys carrying around these 50 cals, and they stand there like, yeah, they're boasting about their rifles, and everybody laughs at them because a 50 cal or anything like that without an optic on it, is like you're going to shoot, you pray and shoot basically to see if you can hit anything with it. But now there's a few of my sources I've seen, sophisticated laser guided rangefinders and sighting systems on some of these that are being found out there.
How much damage can 50 cal? What's the application?
They started getting them specifically with the proliferation of armored vehicles in Mexico. Mexico has a giant industry in armored vehicles
So there's a race in terms of armoring, like protecting, especially high value targets, and then weapons that can deal with those armored, protected, high-value targets.
There was an attempted assassination of a state prosecutor somewhere in, I think, central Mexico. I forget exactly where. But she was riding around a up-armored Jeep, Cherokee, I think it was. And their main means of firepower was 50 cals. And that car was left in pieces. She survived in it, so I think the armored vehicle company that sold her that vehicle has it in the display room. Then before my time, probably 2-3 years before I was actually active, they tried to kill the head of public security in the state of Baja. And with him, it was a grenade launcher, 40 millimeter grenade launcher. It skipped off the armored vehicle and landed in the car behind it, made the back explode. One of the guys that I used to work with was actually in that car. He survived it. But you started to see, they're using armored vehicles now. So let's get 50 caliber now to try and defeat that armor. So that there's always this race of technology basically down there. Armored vehicles. How do you take on an armored vehicle? Well, there's a few ways. 50 cals, if you can mount them in the right way and shoot at a car like that, or a bunch of kids with balloons and acrylic paint on the front windshield and blind the vehicle so they can't drive it anymore is another way. A tow line across a road painted like painted black so you can't see it, and cut the thing in half. Again, I'm not saying any secrets. These are things that people have seen out there. Shoot at the radiator. Some of these radiators are not even the more sophisticated vehicles out there don't have a sufficient armoring around the radiator or the battery housing of some of these vehicles. There was a case of a guy, I think his nickname was El Pelavacas or something like that, out in Sinaloa, level cartel guy. He had an armored vehicle. He was, riding around and he got ambushed. He shot at his car. He was like, I have armor. You can't shoot me. And somebody went up to his car and just put the barrel right in the locking mechanism. And that got him, So it's an interesting place as far as people getting certain types of guns. Armor is prolific down there. I mean, everybody down there, all the cartel members, you see them wearing plate armor. So that's an issue. It's not like you can shoot somebody square in the chest and they'll go down.
Are they afraid to kill Americans? So I know I was traveling in Ukraine on the front. So like a lot of the journalists would travel in like armored vehicles. And at first I was like, it seems like this would attract attention.
Yeah.
Like it seems like they would want to hit those targets. But then I realized over time, as I learned, there's a fear of killing Americans. There could be a drastic escalation of
it's not worth it.
Conflict.
It's kicking a beehive. Yeah. There is a tendency to shy away or stay away from that. I mean, they don't want the heat or the attention.
Outside of that, everyone's game.
But also there's been many cases of Americans being killed down there. I mean, we saw the Mormon massacre happen down there, and all of them were American Mexican. They had both nationalities, and blonde kids, white, being massacred in the middle of a desert, and the cars basically catching fire. This happened, and the Americans sent the FBI down there to kind of review some of what happened down there. And I think that was when Trump started talking about kind of reviving this whole notion of cartels being labeled as a terrorist organization, probably more of a political pressure point he was using to try and get Mexico to reinforce its southern border, which it hasn't. But there's escalation. This already happened and nothing happened, so we can probably get away with it, And again, there's a newer generation moving forward now of people coming into power.
More brutal, more technically savvy.
Well, they have the experience of their parents and the people behind them and what they've done and what gotten away with. And now, more savvy about information warfare. Their main recruiting tool is TikTok. You go to TikTok and you'll see a bunch of these kids at a narco party dancing around. And some of these are videos by cartel members filming other cartel members in cartel controlled territory. And that's a window into that life for who's on TikTok now? Kids.
And the enticing aspect of that is the money, the fun, the high roller life.
And the possibility of making it to a level,
Yeah. A fame of respect, power, money.
Here in the U.S., somebody might, I want a mansion. And I want to, like that. That's their mindset. I want to live, like that rapper. Down there, I mean, if you can buy a house for your mom, or pay off some debts that she might have, or a car, that's enough to kill for.
Yeah. So you also, one of the many things you did is you did security, try to protect in this war, try to protect people, high value people.
Yeah.
How do you and others, how is it possible to protect a high value target like a celebrity or an important politician in this situation?
So I was tasked to protect the governor of Baja and his family. Mm. I was basically replacing a whole contingency of people that were already there that turned out to be corrupted. That wasn't my field. I was operational. I was working with other people doing the counter narcotic stuff. And the director of the institution that I was in basically called me in and said, "Hey, you're going to go and replace these people." And what happened to them? Well,
so you were known as a person that could be kind of trusted.
I was tasked for that. So I think they considered that. And, and I specifically worked for a governor named, Jose Guadalupe Osuna Millan, who's probably one of the best governors we have had in the state. And people want to see if I'm trustworthy or not. They can ask him directly. And I still speak to some members of his family, and we're still, friends in that way.
Is protecting people like technically a difficult problem to solve?
For my experience in that time in place, he was basically spearheading, counter the drug war in Baja when he was in power. So he had threats from all over, not only him, but his family. First thing I realized working that job in Mexico is that we had people coming in to do specialized training of that regard. Israelis, teaching us how they would do things in Israel. That didn't make a lot of sense for us in Mexico. We had people that had some Secret Service experience, kind of showing us how they would do like celebrity bodyguarding or bodyguarding somebody maybe in California of that nature. Didn't make sense for us. Then we got to experience some cross training with some NSW, Naval Special Warfare people who were coming off protection details in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Is there some useful crossover there?
We were struggling with the acceptance that we were basically doing protection details in a war zone.
So the approach that had to be taken in Mexico was similar to the approach you would take in Afghanistan during a war.
Some of the overt militaristic type approaches to security that we had to adopt, from we didn't move him in a single armored vehicle. We had two of them that looked exactly alike. So when we would move around, we would switch one car to the other. Every now and then we would arrive to an event. They would open the door and it would be one of us. And they were like, "Hey, where's the governor? He's in the back one." So they would move to that. So we had to do stuff like that. And again, this is a young me who didn't have any specialized training. I was I was on YouTube
Yeah,
learning some of these things, going online, learning about armored vehicles, learning about architectural armor.
I think you just described a large percentage of the Ukrainian military, how they operate, which is on YouTube, trying to figure out how to use some of this technology. And that's actually incredibly effective.
Yeah,
You know, I do quite a lot of stuff where I'm totally not an expert, totally uneducated, and so on. It's kind of surprising how quickly you can get caught up. As we're talking offline, if you take a course, if you talk to an expert, if you learn from an expert, you can like catch up really quickly.
for me, it was all of a sudden I have this director calling me in, and I'm wearing Vans, and jeans,
Yeah.
t-shirt, and all of a sudden I had 80 some people that I had to move around, and I was in charge of securing planes, and what do I know about that? Airport hangars, armored vehicle maintenance, and purchasing, and figuring out how to set up a counter assault group for a protection detail. And I was like, where am I going to learn all this?
Were you able to quickly figure some of these things out?
On the fly, basically. As I was going, I remember having this experience, being in the our security office on my laptop, figuring out how to set up a counter surveillance side to our protection detail. Basically, how to have people looking for people that might be looking for us, type thing. And then going to San Diego, to Coronado, and training with some people from former SEAL guys and NCIS people who did that job in war zones, and seeing them critique some of the solutions that we came up with on the fly, and being like, oh, we never saw that before. Oh yeah, this is how we're doing it down there. So getting that compliment, and also getting their feedback, like, we probably do this or do that. And it was a learning process on the fly that was pretty, seat of your pants level.
Is it possible for the family and for the high value person to have a sense of normalcy, to have a normal life?
I tried. I was already starting off on the wrong foot, basically, because trust had been violated by the people that I was replacing. So I had to gain that back. Then young kids in that family that wanted to have go out and stuff like that in the most violent city on the planet. So I had to do my homework and figure out places where they were safe to go to, and make friends with certain club owners, and figure out ways to put security in some of these places, and having to create this bubble of normalcy around some of these people was pretty difficult. And there's no way that is a normal for anybody. And God bless them. I know it wasn't easy, and I know that it affected their lives, and they lost on a big part of their youth. Being under that security supervision and bubble probably does a lot for somebody specifically growing up like that. You lose opportunities of things that we take for granted. Just going out, just not telling anybody, and going to the store. Because you want to get some snacks or something like that. That's not available to some of these people.
I have to be honest. When I was in Ukraine, that was a really big benefit.
You'd escape.
No, I couldn't hang out. I couldn't eat when I'm stressed. I would fast and not eat much, so I lost weight. So it's great. It's great for the diet.
That's a good diet to be in. Basically, be under protective custody. That's a good idea for a good new diet.
And just life. It allowed me to focus, get a lot of reading done, focus on the important things in life. I joke, of course, but there's some complexity to this in terms of normalcy of the family, but also just how to operate, like have a mental clarity and a lack of fear. Just basically be good at your job, whatever that job is. As a politician, as a leader, even as a soldier.
Somebody that I think this is Lisa Ola, said this to me, or said something like this to a group of us, that there's nothing wrong with being paranoid. It's about educating your paranoia and knowing what to be afraid of. If you're afraid of everything, you're basically overwhelmed. But if you start educating yourself as far as specifically what to prioritize, as far as what to worry about, war zone, working, protecting somebody, you're not looking at everybody's faces. You're just looking at their hands, because that's what's going to kill you. That's an example of focalizing, what you're paranoid and what you're afraid of.
So looking at the hands, that's specific to a particular situation, but also figuring out which situations to avoid and which
Yeah.
it's okay. I mean, that's like ultimately one of the biggest things you could do.
Yeah. Route analysis. You have to get to the airport and you send off 2 cars to analyze 2 routes, and then on the fly you just change trajectory to create randomness and unpredictability, and have that as a security feature. Having a convoy of 4 vehicles separate into 2 convoys and show up in different parts to, again, make it hard for people to guess where you're going to be.